now to the last metric that we're going to talk about today, and that's the dreaded vacancy. So let's talk about vacancy rates, and there's two main ones. But I mean, obviously, a vacant unit generates no income, but still costs you money. Many of your operating costs remain unchanged, even if you have no tenants. So most investors track vacancy rates, specifically two particular types of vacancy rate. The first one's physical vacancy. So this rate gives you the percent of your units vacant when compared to the total units available. So it's an easy calculation. You take the number of vacant units, multiply it by 100, and divide it by the total number of units. So this metric can be useful on a property by property basis or across your entire portfolio. When doing your pro formas, it's always smart to include a vacancy buffer in your calculations. I personally always use 10%. Some people use 5%, but it's always good to include that in your projections. The second type of vacancy is economic vacancy. This is more non-payment of rents. So in this scenario, a unit isn't vacant, but you aren't getting the rents. So it's considered economically vacant. So it's the same idea as the calculation above. This is typical of most eviction scenarios, but can also include a free unit that you're giving to someone like an on-site manager. So it's a good idea to keep an eye on your overall market vacancy rate. As I mentioned before, to be conservative, build that rate into potential income calculations before buying a new building. You'll want to build in this buffer of 5 to 10% in all your pro forma calculations. And this ensures you can still cover all your expenses if you have vacancy in those particular units. So I'm going to pass it over to Victor, who's going to talk about, they call it occupancy rate, but same idea.
Thank you, Brad. I'm actually going to share my entire screen, so it might look a little strange for a quick second. Here we go. And as Brad mentioned, we don't have that vacancy rate, but we actually have the occupancy rate for Chris's 5213 Kevin's Way. It's laid out here on the right-hand corner, and we can see that it's fully occupied. The way we keep track of this occupancy is through the leases and tenants page. This will lay out the tenants for the specific properties. You can see Chris has multiple properties. But let's just say that our cottage unit here, I'm a renter, moved out, and we want to keep track. That is a vacant property. What we'll do is actually just delete the rent, click out, and our system will automatically calculate that unit as vacant. If we go back to the dashboard, it updates on its own as 50% occupied. So this is a great way to keep track of which units are vacant or how much of it is occupied. As Brad mentioned, the 10% stress test, we have our vacancy rate. We have a stress test that will help understand the vacancy within those units, and you can manipulate figures. So if you're expecting to collect, let's say 90% of the rent for a modeling period of 6 months, you can go ahead and set that up, click download. It will appear as an Excel file, and it will lay out the properties, the expected income, the expenses, and your total ending cash. These figures are also available to be manipulated. So let's just say something goes down to 50%. The model will update on its own. And you can play around with that for extended periods of time as well. So these two numbers you can manipulate.
Yeah, no, and that's really critical, Victor. I do this for all my properties, and it's not just your current assets that you have in your portfolio. I mean, it's always good to do stress testing, at least on an annual basis. And I mean, the last 3 months have been, proves that we really need to be doing this in our investment portfolios. But also when you go to acquire a property, doing some stress testing before you acquire it, as you're using other metrics like GRM and cap rates and comparing different properties, do the stress testing as well, just to make sure that you're not going to be caught with a poorly producing property in your portfolio. So thank you for that.